Why does he do it? 0345 6060973. Why do they do it? Why do they defend what they know to be indefensible? I have abandoned the habit of trying to find senior Conservatives about whom I can say nice things because it turned into a curse. But Zahawi's always struck me as a solid guy. Yeah, don't laugh and don't get tribal yourself, because footballification cuts both ways. He's always struck me as a solid guy. He's always seemed thoughtful. He's always seemed intelligent. I was told by several teachers when he got his feet under the desk at education, the first thing he started to do was undo much of the damage done by Gavin Williamson. We haven't even mentioned him yet today. There's so many of them. It's just like Zulu, isn't it? You look up and there's just incompetent after incompetent after incompetent after incompetent coming over the hill. So, why does he do it? And I'd like a sophisticated answer, something a little bit more nuanced than because he wants to be Prime Minister one day. I don't know. Why does he do it? 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Rebecca Cook is here now with your headlines. I'm going to give some special love to everyone who's correcting my Alexander Hamilton quote, because I love you, and I would have done that, I think. I think the original quote is, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything, right? But of course, after it had been turned into poetry by Lin-Manuel Miranda in the superlative musical Hamilton, it's if you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for? I'm not going to sing it to you. So you're not correcting my quote when you quote the musical to me, because that is an adaptation of the original quote for musical purposes. So obviously it sounds better because it scans. It's got the rhythm of the most magnificent musical you could ever hope to see. If you stand for nothing, Burr, what do you fall for? So anyway, thank you for that, because that made me smile. And there's quite a lot of you who've done it as well. So I should have just gone with the lyric, shouldn't I? But if I'd gone with the lyric, lots of people would have texted to say, actually, James, I think you'll find that that's the lyric from the musical rather than what Alexander Hamilton reportedly or reputedly wrote or said. So you just can't win sometimes. Apparently, if you are in New York, you can go to the place. Have I told you this before? I read it recently. You can go to the place where Alexander Hamilton died. You can rest your head against the rock that he rested his head against as he passed away after a duel with Aaron Burr, the guy in the lyric. If you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for? I don't know why I find that kind of thing so magical, and I fully appreciate that not everybody does, but there's something about, I don't know what it is. There's something about that kind of detail that just absolutely entrances me. Anyway, 25 to 12 is the time. Why do they do it? Let's play Nadeem Zahawi from yesterday, and then I'll bring you up to date with what happened an hour or two later.
You don't know, but do you not know who called the meeting because you didn't ask the question or because Number 10 didn't tell you the answer?
No, but if Sue Gray decides that, when she publishes, she decides how she's going to deliver her final report.
That's a completely different question.
But what I'm saying to you is, ultimately, there are two facts that your viewers need to know. One, the Prime Minister did not, would never intervene in this report. He wants Sue Gray to publish her report. Secondly, I've worked with Sue Gray. I know Sue Gray. Sue Gray's integrity is beyond question.
So you're asking our viewers to accept that the Prime Minister did not intervene in this report, right?
Absolutely right.
Right, so we now know that the Prime Minister did instigate a meeting with Sue Gray to discuss the report, and it is now reported in the Times today, which is the paper of record, that he sought to persuade her not to publish it. Why does Nadeem Zahawi do this to himself? Never mind the rest of the country, never mind you and me. Just talk me through it. Why does he do it? See, it's not the money, and that's not a crass or a cynical answer. You look at some of the people who've gone into bat for Russian oligarchs, and there's no mystery. You can turn your conscience off if you're earning 10 million quid a year. I wonder if they say every man has his price, don't they? So whether that's true or not is a question for the ages. But it's not money. This is a fella you remember when the expenses scandal broke and he got into trouble for claiming money to heat his stables. You don't have heated stables if you've got financial problems. So I mean, some of it, vanity, pride, power, but then how can your vanity accommodate that level of debasement? You see, I would have thought that to be vain, you need to be arrogant, and to be arrogant, you need to have quite high self-regard, and to have quite high self-regard would mean that there's no earthly way you would countenance shaming yourself, humiliating yourself in public like that for somebody else. So then Johnson probably is part of the answer. Why does Nadeem Zahawi do this to himself? Why do they all do it to themselves? Why does Grant Shapps do it to himself? See, a lot of people mock Nadine Dorries for the way she looks at Boris Johnson. Some photographs that capture a look of almost puppyish adoration, which is a little unseemly perhaps, but the behaviour of people like Nadeem Zahawi is every bit as fawning, every bit as inexplicable. Why does he do it? Have another listen. This is from Sunday Morning on Sky News. I played it yesterday. Sorry, I got my dates the wrong way round. Why does he do it to himself? And a special apology first to Stephen J. and Milton Keynes, who says I should have issued a spoiler alert before revealing that Aaron Burr kills Hamilton. Mate, it happened about 300 years ago. I mean, it's not... I know you're joking, and it's a very good joke, but no. So here he is, Nadeem Zahawi, Secretary of State for Education. Imagine that. What a great job. Imagine phoning your mum and telling her you've been made Secretary of State for Education. Oh, it's really wonderful, son. I'm so proud of you. What are you going to do at work today? Oh, I'm going to go on live television and defend the lies of Boris Johnson that will then be revealed to be lies before I've even got home. And your mum says, why, son? Why are you doing that? My mum would. Why are you doing that? My dad, God. My dad certainly would have done when he was like, why on earth? He said to me once, he said, why on earth are you going to Belfast to debate drugs with Peter Hitchens? He's a columnist in the Mail on Sunday, and I couldn't answer it. I couldn't answer. Around about then that I stopped thinking that appearing on telly was a very impressive. Dad said, I'm mowing the lawn later. Do you want to come and watch? This was in response to the suggestion that he might want to watch me on the telly. Why are you doing that, son? Don't know, Dad. Everyone else seems to think it's a big deal. Why are you doing that, Nadeem? Why are you doing that? Here he is, Sunday Morning, live television.
You say you don't know, but do you not know who called the meeting because you didn't ask the question or because Number 10 didn't tell you the answer?
No, but if Sue Gray decides that, when she publishes, she decides, how she's going to deliver her final report.
That's a completely different question.
But what I'm saying to you is, ultimately, there are two facts that your viewers need to know. One, the Prime Minister did not, would never intervene in this report. He wants Sue Gray to publish her report. Secondly, I've worked with Sue Gray. I know Sue Gray. Sue Gray's integrity is beyond question.
So you're asking our viewers to accept that the Prime Minister did not intervene in this report, right?
Absolutely right.
Except he did. Full stop. So why do people like Nadeem Zahawi do this to themselves? And I don't know whether you heard... I can't remember who it was, so forgive me, but some people have started claiming that Sky News is left-wing. Incredible, really, but that might be why, because remember that Rule 2, warning sign number 2 of a cult from the Cult Education Institute is criticism of the leader or questioning the leader is considered persecution. So Sophie Ridge there on Sky News really doing the job that some other political editors... Perhaps not Theo Ushwood, God forbid anyone thinks I'm talking about him. I'm talking about a recently uninstalled political editor would have done well to learn from how you actually speak truth to power like that, or ask difficult questions rather than ask questions designed solely to protect your access to these senior politicians. And then, of course, all the headbangers start claiming Sky News is left-wing because they're daring to ask questions. And the BBC is under attack from the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport for the same thing. And so all of these things, they all tie into the same story, which is a corruption of a country, a decline of a country. So I don't think Nadeem Zahawi wants to see Britain become a sort of a pale, corrupt shadow of its former self. So why does he go along with the man who's turning it into precisely that? I do not know. And how did this happen? How did we end up on this path to such abject and complete shame, where politicians no longer have to resign, whatever the wrongdoing may be? Mark's in Enfield. Mark, sorry to keep you. What would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm glad you added that last little bit at the end, because that was the reason for my original call.
Good.
But I more than happy to offer my opinions on the complicity. As opposed to your previous caller, I think it goes back further than the European elections. I think that particularly the US and the UK had a fundamental shift in 2008 with the financial crash, where Obama decided to stimulate the economy, and the Tory party from 2010 onwards, with the complicity of the right-wing press, went in the opposite direction. And I think that led to the European elections. It led to Brexit. So that's when I think it all started. Austerity
is where it began. What was the ideological justice? Because, I mean, I love it. I'm sure you've heard me steal Alexei Sale's brilliant line that austerity was the policy that essentially meant that the international financial crisis caused largely by the banking industry could be fixed by closing down libraries in Wolverhampton. The notion they were terrified of state intervention and state spending to protect the economy.
No, I think it goes deeper than that.
Go on.
I think that there has been a fundamental wealth grab. I'm middle management,
right.
doing reasonably well. I'm applying for jobs now at the same basic salary as I was applying for 8-9 years ago.
Yes.
And even though the US are talking about wage stagnation, I think the US's wages have gone up on average about 20,000 over the last 10 years, and ours are flatlined. But we're not told that because with the complicity of the right-wing press, it's always blame them, blame them, blame them.
Who are they blaming at the moment? Because I'm fascinated by this, and I think your analysis is solid, but who are they blaming at the moment for things going wrong? Because
Well, I think that they're treading water. I think that they can survive at the moment on the crest of a COVID wave.
Woke. They're blaming woke.
They'll blame woke. Yeah. They'll blame woke. But I think in terms of the fundamentals of the economy, they've got. I think enough people will forgive them. I mean, But
why? Because you're describing a wealth grab from the very, very top, and the numbers support you. Mm-hmm. Even over COVID, the numbers are chilling, actually. The amount of huge fortunes that increased while everybody else was at best treading water. Why do people go along with it then?
Because they don't see it.
Right.
Because
because of the blame thing. So your life's not going very well. It's all the fault of that Romanian builder over the road. It's got nothing to do with the people in charge.
As long as the Tories are giving the poorest people in society somebody else to look down on, then that's an old Tory trick, right?
I know that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what they do. Don't look up at your CEO who's had a 2,000% pay increase in the last 5 years. Look down at the people that are coming and taking the lower level jobs, because they're the ones that are really after you.
And Johnson becomes the sort of Uber CEO, not Uber, because that's a company now, isn't it? Not just a German word, but he becomes like the CEO of what you describe. I mean, they all bend the knee to him because
Well, that talks to the complicity.
Yes.
And I think there's one cause, two different reasons. I think Johnson's the cause. He's shown with his purge of sensible Tories, Dominic Grieve, there is no room in the party unless you're loyal to the chief.
And loyal to the lie about Brexit as well. We can't ignore the reason for all of this.
But I do think there's two reasons. I think someone like Nadeem Zahawi, who's a intelligent, professional politician, when you get to that level of politics, you have to accept ministerial responsibility. You know that you're going to have to defend things that sometimes don't sit right with you, because that's part and parcel of being a minister.
Right, yes.
And I think he's in that position. He's doing what is necessary as a minister. Now, previously, you've always had to take that line as ministerial collective responsibility. It's very different now because you're defending straight-up lies. But I think that's the mindset that somebody such as him would go into that position. I'm going to stay here because I want to do more good than harm. I am better here than not being here, because if I don't do this, there's a whole bunch of BNP-like politicians on the back bench.
So this is a generous reading of Nadeem Zahawi's behaviour. I like it. I like it because I want to be generous. I mean, I don't want things to be as bleak as they sometimes appear. So he's thinking, I need to be near to the bloke with his hand on the rudder just to make sure that someone else isn't near to the hand on the rudder, and B, hopefully to dissuade him from steering the boat into that bloody great iceberg over there.
And also, at some point, Johnson will go. And the likes of Zahawi will think, I want to be in position to take over a proper Tory party with proper policies and a proper plan for the country when this...
Or thereabouts. I want to still be... I want to be in the room where it happens.
And then you have the others, though, because I don't think that that's where people like Grant Shapps or Nadine Dorries' heads at. I think they are it's still, the cause is still Johnson and requiring loyalty, but they're there, let's face it, because if they're not loyal to him, they'd be out on their ear. They would not have a hope in hell of getting anywhere near that position if it wasn't for feigning loyalty, just absolute bending.
Well, that's, to be fair, that is why I picked Zahawi, because I think that the sort of weird, ignorant sycophancy is easy to describe and to discern. I mean, it's shaming and it's horrible, but yes, and the Zahawi line would be that I have to. What am I going to do? If you speak up or speak out, you end up toast. You get purged, and yet I want to be here because I think I can do some good, and that, for the time being, means appearing on television and defending the very, very bad and humiliating myself in the process. That's just Mark's theory, and I'll tell you what, Mark, actually, that considering that wasn't the question you were expecting to answer when I embarked on another interminable monologue, and it was the one that I was asking just before you came on to answer a completely different one, that's 10 out of 10, mate.
I can have opinions on most things relating to this government at the drop of a hat. Can I just say one final thing?
Not really. Only if you can do it in 8 seconds, because I'm incredibly late.
I went to the Tory party conference this year as part of my job.
Oh, yeah.
And there are clearly Tory MPs that really want to do the best for this country.
Yeah, I know there are.
There are others that don't. And we've just talked about some of the different ones.
Yeah, powerfully put. Very powerfully put. And some of these Tory MPs even speak to me off the record, would you believe? And I'm not here to criticise them. I'm really not. I do understand their motivation, and it is pretty much what Mark just attributed to Nadeem Zahawi, although he is not one of the MPs who has bent my ear at any moment in the last couple of years. It's 11:49. It is 11:53. Straight to the calls. There's been plenty of me in the last couple of hours, and then I'll tell you what we're going to talk about in the final hour of the show today. Matthew's in Brighouse. Matthew, take your pick. What do you want to say?
I want to try and expand a little bit upon your last caller, really, and look at how do we get here? Why are people being complicit in keeping us there? And then also to touch upon the whole notion of Trump and Johnson and parallels and things like that. I think we get here because it was all about protection of interest in the status quo. The world's changing enormously, economic power, political power changing. And I think that Johnson was born of that, Brexit was born of that, of a desire to protect a certain way of doing things, Britannia rules the waves and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but that's how we get there. And Johnson wins elections. And all of us, when we vote, hold our nose a little bit and look the other way to a greater or lesser extent when we vote for somebody. And the Conservatives were prepared to do that with Johnson because he could win, and he keeps winning. And so people like to use the example of Zahawi. They will, to a certain extent, keep looking the other way and holding their nose. There probably will come a point, I think your last caller was right, where they can't keep looking the other way and holding their nose.
Do you?
But there's a parallel there between
Trump.
Johnson over here and Trump over there.
Yeah,
good Republicans. There are good Republicans in the same way there are still good Conservative MPs who come into politics for all the right reasons and want to do the right thing. And they looked the other way with Trump, and they held their noses with Trump because it was the lesser of two evils to get him into power.
That's where perhaps my own naivety kicks in, because my question then is, why would you want power if you can't use it to do good? And then we disagree on what good is, I suppose, as well, don't we?
And that's the thing, is that there will still be things that this Conservative government will do that Zahawi will say are a price worth paying. And if it
can't think of any off the top of my head, can you?
No, I'm struggling too, but there we are. But I think it ties in as well. I think you saw the same thing when Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party. So many people in the Labour Party and on the left voted for Corbyn and kept supporting Corbyn, even though they knew there were these flaws, even though they were having to look the other way, because they wanted a change in the status quo.
Yeah,
so
that seems fair.
There are direct parallels between the two. And just to tie in with your chap that likes it when people lie because it winds you up.
Yeah.
And how you get to people like that. In a funny kind of way, they're only doing the same way that they're doing the same thing that people like Zahawi are doing.
Yeah.
They want things to be a certain way.
It's a vicarious success.
Yeah, and it's very easy to persuade somebody. The one thing that the whole Brexit and so much of Johnson's shtick is by bringing someone else up you'll get put down. So by improving the lot of the Romanian who comes to this country, by improving the lot of the person on the other side of the world, there's only a finite amount in the pie, and they're taking your slice. And that's how it's done. It's been done for years. Politics of fear, etc., etc. And Johnson's very good, and the Conservative Party, the modern current Conservative Party, have been very good at feeding on that, of selling that to people.
Although I think they might be running out of road, because I don't think Johnson was troubled by immigration in the context of European Union membership. He just weaponised it, and so did Cummings, and of course they hitched themselves to Farage's despicable posters and his often profoundly racist rhetoric. But the new immigration, if the newspapers decide to weaponise the immigration figures now, the Tories are toast. I mean, I don't know who'd step into the breach, but the numbers out now are, I suppose they'd worry about a party appearing to the right of them. Because they can't currently blame it on something they don't like Brussels. The immigration figures are barely getting reported. Migration Watch desperately jumping up and down, screaming, and barely getting picked up, whereas once these sort of stories, these sort of numbers would have been front-page news, because there's no end game at the moment in complaining about immigration. Who are you going to get rid of?
Well, and I think what they'll do is that will cease to be a story, and they'll find another one, because again, it's about this maintenance of power.
Well, they're trying to turn woke. They're trying to make woke the new enemy, and this on a day where we learn of another 14-year-old schoolgirl. Well, the last one was 15, mixed race on this occasion, again being strip searched by Metropolitan Police while menstruating, and no doubt there'll be people complaining later about stories in the newspaper urging police officers to become more aware of black history and more aware of what you might call woke issues, so that they can stop being racist in situations like these two poor schoolgirls being treated in ways that you can't quite imagine anybody else being treated. And I mentioned that. It's a brilliant, again, callers today off the scale, not for the first, it's frequent occurrence, isn't it now? But thank you, Matthew. I'll be nicking some of your ideas and passing them off as my own, which is the highest compliment I can pay a caller. But the numbers I'm referring to, 25% increase in work visas and a 49% increase in family visas, a 52% increase in student visas. 24 Tory politicians, very much on the right of the party, or the far right of the party, sounding the alarm over this data and suggesting that the figure for this year could be higher than any in recent history. And they're not coming from Europe. So the callers I used to get saying they were voting for Brexit in order to cut down on the number of brown faces behind the tills in Tesco, well, they're like Tinder now, and it's a question of who's going to come along and light it. They've tried it with the poor fellas and women in boats coming into Dover, all getting deported to Rwanda now. So essentially what Priti Patel's done there is call her own supporters racist liars, because they're supposed to pretend that they want people with valid asylum claims to stay here. But the ones getting sent back to Rwanda are never going to be able to stay here, whether their application is found to be valid or not. So that's not working, despite Farage turning up in Kent with his Fisher-Price binoculars every other day and a little camcorder. What would happen when they start to weaponise that again? I don't know. I'm just pointing out the manipulative air or part of this whole conversation. It's 3 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Make of it what you will, as particularly in the context of people trying to tell you that you don't care about the continuing shame of Boris Johnson's party going during COVID, going to parties while you couldn't even go to funerals. But we could carry on this conversation for the rest of the programme. I'm not going to, so my apologies to Dave and James and Aidan, David and others, because we may return to it. Well, we will return to it in some way, shape or form. And I wonder whether the fact that we could not move on, we could continue to talk about it, is relevant to the story that we're going to talk about next. Because there's a sense, isn't there, of the bandwidth being taken up now, the political bandwidth, never mind the media. And this is the problem with not doing the right thing. You shouldn't have to keep covering stories that would have brought down any other previous Prime Minister. So, I mean, don't even pick the party. Pick the bit about trying to get Sue Gray to drop the report, summoning her to Downing Street effectively because she works for him, and suggesting to her that she drop the report. That's a resignation issue. There's so many resignation issues. When the media stops talking about them, when the media stops covering them, we're finished. Just so you know that. So anyone telling you not to care about it, any newspaper suggesting it's not a big deal, don't they know there's a war on? They are literally abnegating their duty to you not just to speak truth to power, which is not everybody's cup of tea, but to tell you what power is doing. And if they succeed in persuading you not to care, and if they continue to abandon their most basic duty as journalists, then we're toast, right? We're finished in a meaningful sense. That is literally what we are here to do. It doesn't matter who is in Downing Street. We tell you the truth about what they are doing so that you can arrive at an informed opinion. Okay? And you care. My switchboard looks like a Christmas tree from 5 minutes after 10 this morning until now. I know you care. And I know that everybody honest cares. And I know that everybody telling you not to care knows that they should care too, but they're too far in now. They're too far down the rabbit hole. They've got too much riding on the liar to admit that they bet their house on the liar, and of course on Brexit as well. So that means that other stories that I think would prompt resignations or sackings in other contexts at other times almost get crowded out of the news. I mean, Dominic Raab is no longer Foreign Secretary, but that was a cabinet reshuffle. It wasn't a punishment for his appalling performance. Same with Gavin Williamson. Sir Gavin Williamson. Was that a cheese dream? Was that a cheese dream? Gavin Williamson getting knighted, or did that actually happen? Tell me it was a cheese dream, please. It must have been a cheese dream, right? You performed probably the worst education secretary in the history of education secretaries. And because Boris Johnson is frightened of what secrets you might have in your little black book from when you were chief whip, he palms you off with a knighthood. No, I dreamt that, right? I must have had too much gorgonzola that night. A little bit. I went in a bit hard on the pecorino. That must have been a cheese dream. No one would knight Gavin Williamson. He put the son of a KGB agent in the House of Lords, mate. Oh, yeah. It wasn't a cheese dream, was it? He's knighted Gavin Williamson. So they got removed from their major posts, him and Raab, but not exactly as a punishment, was it? And Raab is still Deputy Prime Minister, officially. Although it's a bit of a non-thing, isn't it? It's a bit like being deputy head boy or something like that. Doesn't really mean anything, but it looks good on the CV, and your mum's ever so chuffed when she's at her coffee mornings. There's been a report into the handling of the UK's evacuation from Afghanistan, all right? And it was rendered inevitable by Donald Trump's astonishingly I don't even know what word to use to describe the deal that he did with the Taliban, which essentially involved the abandonment of the entire country. And I'm pretty sure Joe Biden could have done a better job of following through on the deal that Donald Trump signed. I don't think he could have disowned it. I don't think he could have abandoned it, because that would be like signing an international treaty and then trying to break it a couple of months later, and no serious government would ever sign an international treaty and then try to abandon it or break it a couple of months later, would they, Lord Frost? So I don't know if Biden had any choice but to follow through on it, but this is a conversation about how the British government handled the withdrawal, the evacuation. So these are the decisions taken and the tactics deployed by British leaders, British politicians. And the conclusion is that a failure of leadership shown by Dominic Raab and the most senior civil servants at the Foreign Office was a betrayal to UK allies that actually cost lives. And this is a report by MPs from all parties. It's the Foreign Affairs Committee, and they condemn ministerial and civil servant decision-making and lack of planning that led to Afghans who had helped the British mission being left behind. You also have, and remember, Johnson corrupts everything. It's contagious. I don't know if you remember the toing and froing over the evacuation of dogs and possibly some cats from Afghanistan. The claim that it had been done at Johnson's behest, and then the counterclaim that it hadn't, and then I think the proof that it had. Again, lie. It also attacked a lack of transparency over who authorised the evacuation of dogs and cats owned by the Nowzad Animal Charity, and urged the department's most senior civil servant to consider resigning for his failure to ensure it took the basic administrative step of recording its decisions. But how can anybody call upon a senior civil servant to resign over this when Dominic Raab didn't, and Priti Patel was proven to be a bully by an independent report by the advisor on ministerial standards to the Prime Minister, who ripped up the report, left Priti Patel in the job and prompted the independent advisor to resign? God, it is one of those days where it's all tying together, isn't it? But I want to talk about Afghanistan. We don't know. It's a counterfactual whether or not in a previous government a foreign secretary who presided over such an abject failure of leadership would have felt compelled to resign, because those were days where honour mattered, and when politicians did bad things, they often faced consequences. Those days are gone. We no longer live in that country. This is what the report says. A cross-party panel of MPs, relying on information provided by whistleblowers, the absence of the top leadership, both ministerial and official, when Kabul fell, is a grave indictment of the attitudes of the government, representing a failure of leadership across the board in the Foreign Office. It gets worse. The failings were a betrayal of our allies, a betrayal of our allies. I mean, I know that we're supposed to fetishise flags to prove our patriotism in Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain, but my God, a phrase like that should really be ringing through the corridors of Downing Street, shouldn't it? A betrayal of our allies, which was not only morally wrong, but has undermined the credibility of the UK with serious consequences for our interests around the world. This is incredible stuff. This is shaming, humiliating, actually, and horrible. And it's the nature of the current government. Kabul, as you'll remember, fell in August of 2021, so this story's not even a year old yet. And yet they move on, they move away, anger fades, allies betrayed. And of course they're now trying to disown the international treaty that they signed to, quotes, get Brexit done, end quote. So it is not just at home that this stuff matters, it matters abroad as well. I'll stress again, a cross-party panel of MPs. So they do the work in committee. They just won't do it in public. They'll do it in committee. I know some committees unfold in public, but they won't break cover as a member of the parliamentary party in the way that they will exercise proper scrutiny as a member of a parliamentary select committee. And it's better than nothing. The committees are probably the biggest bulwark we've got at the moment against the corruption that we've spent the whole show discussing and describing. The absence of the top leadership, both ministerial and official, when Kabul fell is a grave indictment of the attitudes of the government, representing a failure of leadership across the board in the Foreign Office. So where are all the flag fetishists? Where are all the people with bulldogs on their avatars and poppies on their profiles? Where are they all? A betrayal of our allies. Men and women who risk their lives to help our troops on the ground in a war zone. Where are all the people for whom this must be a resignation issue for, if not Dominic Raab as Deputy Prime Minister, then even perhaps Boris Johnson as Prime Minister? A betrayal of our allies. Where are you? Where have you gone? All you people who claim to be patriots and get cross about invented threats to a statue of Winston Churchill. Where are you all? This is the real deal. This is a real story. These are real deaths of real people caused by political incompetence, stretching to the very top of the Foreign Office where Dominic Raab, well, I'd like to say where Dominic Raab was sitting, but of course he wasn't sitting at the very top of the Foreign Office. He was sitting on a beach in bloody Greece. So where are you all? You get cross about an invented threat to a statue of Winston Churchill, but you've not even noticed the betrayal of our allies by incompetent political leadership? It's almost as if you're not patriotic at all, isn't it? It's almost as if you don't actually give a flying fig about our allies or real men and women. You just want to give yourself a pat on the back for being patriotic because you're defending the mythical honour of a statue. I don't know how you deal with this if you served there. So I want you to tell me. There was a decision to remove UK consulate staff, which led to a 48-hour delay before replacements arrived. The Foreign Office most senior civil servant failed to return from holiday until the 26th of August, after the civilian evacuation had ended. Dominic Raab, we know, conducted events from his holiday. He refused to return from holiday at the time Kabul fell to the Taliban on the 13th of August. The report states this mismanagement and under-resourcing of the evacuation effort in a crucial period likely cost hundreds of people their chance to leave the country and as a result likely cost lives. And once again, we learn that junior officials demonstrated courage and integrity. Chaotic and arbitrary decision-making runs through this inquiry. And the chair of the committee is Tom Tugendhat, one of the Conservatives that manages somehow to sustain perception of integrity and decency despite being surrounded by colleagues who wouldn't know either if it sat on their faces. We are still working hard, says the government, to assist the people of Afghanistan, having already helped over 4,600 individuals. So here's a report by a cross-party panel of MPs absolutely covering the government in shame. What does the government do? What does the government do in Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain? Rubbish. We're doing a great job. We got all the big decisions right. Yeah, whatever. They're dead allies. Psh, poof. Betrayed allies. Who cares? Big dog needs protecting. Everyone rally round the Pritzker. I only want to talk to soldiers, if that's all right with you. 0345 6060 973 or Afghans. Okay? Well, what does this story mean to you? Because it's not right that we spend 2 hours today talking about the scandal surrounding the Prime Minister, because we shouldn't be doing so. We shouldn't be having to do so. He shouldn't be there. As long as he's there, we have to talk about what he does. And as long as what he does is scandalous and or illegal, we have to talk about it a lot. But we should be talking about other things. We should be talking about the betrayal of our allies in a war zone. Here are the numbers now, you will get through. How do you process this as a soldier? Just vent your spleen, get it off your chest, tell me how you feel. 0345 6060 973. And if you are an Afghan, talk to me about your relationship with the UK. Okay? 0345 6060 973. How do you feel about learning officially now that we, the British, betrayed you, our allies? But I'm afraid I have to tell you now, if you're expecting anyone to carry the can for this, if you're expecting anyone to be punished for this, if you're expecting anyone to take responsibility for this, if you're expecting there to be any consequences for this, then apart from the outside possibility that a civil servant might cash his pension in early, you are whistling in the wind. Because a fish rots from the head down. And if Boris Johnson takes responsibility for nothing, why the flip should Dominic Raab? So forget that for a moment and just tell me how you feel. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. If you've done a tour in Afghanistan or if you are from Afghanistan, just use my programme as a platform to tell the world what you think about this betrayal. It's 12:18. It's 20 minutes after 12, and do you know what? I can't do another day of how did this happen. I've done 2 hours of it already, but how did we become a country where we betray our allies and it merits barely a squeak, barely a whisper in the government-supporting media? That's a question you just might want to ponder. And if you are of that tribe who care passionately about invented threats to statues of Winston Churchill and consider the Union flag to be something of epic importance and value, what does patriotism mean in your tiny little brain if it doesn't mean absolute horror and disgust at this story regarding our abandonment of allies in Afghanistan? It's breathtaking. Or maybe it's not, and I'm getting carried away, and you will tell me from the perspective of your service in the army or the armed forces, or indeed your life in Afghanistan, that this isn't quite as bad as it looks. John's in Kettering. John, what would you like to say?
Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Very well, John.
I've been listening since 10 o'clock this morning. I love the opening phrases that you use in that. It's
Thank you.
The country's not the same anymore. Absolutely amazing, and I love the fact that you kept repeating it. And I agree. I was just like, wow, what a way to open a program.
Thank you.
A listening show. But yes, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I served there from the beginning. Did 3 tours. Come out in 2014.
Wow.
Lost two close friends. So if I get emotional,
Of course.
sorry.
No, you take it. It's yours.
I've lost a cousin. Yeah, it's. I want to harp on about the politicians, really.
Yeah.
The way they've treated us. I feel used. I feel sorry for the Afghan people.
Oh, mate.
Yeah, it's. Sorry, I do apologise to your listeners.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare. Don't you dare apologise. You've got nothing to apologise for. So I'll talk for a bit while you get your breath back.
Please, please.
And then I just want to steer you to the detail because the withdrawal was inevitable. That was negotiated and needed to be delivered. So the political decision making behind that road leads to Donald Trump's White House. That's a conversation for another day. The detail of the withdrawal, the British involvement, the governmental involvement, the political involvement. Do you understand how that could have happened? Do you understand how, for example, there was a changeover of staff that meant desks were unoccupied for 2 days? The Foreign Secretary stayed on the beach in Greece. The most senior civil servant in the Foreign Office stayed on holiday until the 26th of August. With your service and your history, is that business as usual? Is it the politicians, like the lions led by donkeys line, just all over?
What a perfect phrase to use. Yes, it is. I've served under Margaret Thatcher right up to David Cameron. Sorry.
Yeah.
So quite a long service, as you can imagine, there under many politicians. But the politicians of late, I've just hold them in contempt, like they hold the British people in contempt.
Feels like that, doesn't it?
Very much so. Yes. I actually starting to believe now that the word democracy doesn't really exist. It's just a politician's word. But getting back to Afghanistan, I do as I am told. I am an extension of politics.
Yeah.
I go where I am told. Now I go with the attitude of that I am a professional Royal Marine Commando, and I am there not to take life, but to save life. Terrorism is a completely different thing.
Right.
Terrorism is an ideology of where they don't like the way you live your life because you are a free person. In many ways. Now, I'm sent to Afghanistan or Iraq or Afghanistan, including Northern Ireland.
Right.
And we are there to do a job to make sure that people can go to bed on a night time and live safely and wake up in the morning without anything going wrong in that period of time. Now, I can take solace in that because I've achieved that in my career alongside my brothers, I'm going to use the word. With Afghanistan, when we saw the withdrawal, I felt embarrassed for the United Kingdom because of the way our politicians were acting. They were blasé about it. Now, what I'm about to turn around and say next about American withdrawal, I'm not blaming the American armed forces. I am not blaming the American people. I am blaming the people who are at the top, who have got no empathy with what was happening on the ground. It was. And you only have to look at watch an American war film, and you'll have that political element in it, and they'll turn and say yes. But there's what's the term I'm trying to think of? You're going to have to excuse my vocabulary, Joe, but I think yours is immense.
You're doing pretty well, and I don't think if we're going to compare CVs, mate, I don't think I'm going to come out on top in many departments.
Everything's voting.
Yes,
they are more concerned about people's votes, about staying in power. They are not interested about the man on the ground that they've sent there. I'm bringing something else slightly in the early part of your programme. Let the bodies pile high. Please tell me that my Prime Minister didn't say that.
Well, I hope not. Someone who was in the room where it happens insists that he did.
I hope not, because I'll tell you what, I voted to put that man in power. And that I'm disgusted disgusted with myself that was ever came true.
I mean, you're very hard on yourself, if you'd allow me to say that. You don't need to be. You don't need to apologise for your emotions, and you didn't know what was going to happen 2 years down the line when you voted for it.
I'll tell you what, James. Do you know something? I'm a 55-year-old man, and obviously we've got parents, and I admire and admired my parents. This is on a personal basis now, and looked up to my father was my hero.
Yes.
Now, we were all told, as people of this country, told to toe the line, and we have done as a people. We are a very, very generous, very placid nation of people. We're not aggressors. We're not like that. You only got to look at our history. And you look at the way our politicians are acting, they have let the people of this country down, bouncing back into Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And the way it's just absolute, people are now looking at us as a people, and they think we're a joke because of the few.
Well, this is the line in the report. The serious consequences for our interests around the world undermined the credibility of the UK, not only morally wrong, a betrayal of our allies. And this is a cross-party panel of MPs. What I want you to tell me is whether this would have happened in previous years, whether under other governments this mess would have unfolded.
Well, to be honest, I've Margaret. I know. We can't like everybody.
No,
it's impossible to like everybody, every politician. But I think if Margaret Thatcher was still in power, if we could have somebody like Margaret Thatcher with them traits,
do you know?
Then I think it's
not a name I'd agree with you on in many contexts, but just in terms of other domestic policies, but in the context of how are we going to stand by our allies in former war zones or in war zones from which we're withdrawing, and how much effort are we going to put into looking after the people that looked after us? I think you're right for what it's worth. I think that was an area in which she was an exemplar, but I suspect that Blair and Brown would have been as well, that Major probably would have been, and that Theresa May probably would have been as well, or David Cameron. I could be wrong. I just think there's something about the current generation that is beyond belief, actually.
I totally agree with you. Do you know something? I'll harp on about the Ukrainian war ever so shortly.
Go on.
Everybody's calling Boris Johnson a war leader. Yeah. No, he's not. No. I'll tell you he's a war leader. You're actually talking to one who was a sergeant on the ground in Afghanistan, a full corporal in Iraq, a lance corporal in Northern Ireland. He ain't no war leader, because I wouldn't go to war with him.
That's powerful stuff. It really is.
I would not.
I hear you.
I tell you now, I would not. I'll tell you where I would put him. Pot washer. That's what he would. He wouldn't even get out of camp because he would jeopardise my guys' lives and my guys' lives. As a stripey in the Royal Marines, when I'd say to my guys is this, and I will end on this, James.
Go on.
If you've problems at home, you leave them in the UK. The UK will always be there. If you want to go home in one piece, then you get your mind together and you switch on. And that's what we do. We do our jobs professionally. I don't give a person stood in front of me that wanted to kill me 1 minute and then he put his weapon down, then he is no longer my enemy. But up until that point, he is. Because we are compassionate. They are British Armed Forces of this country.
That's the point, isn't it? That's such a powerful point, because that's what we left behind, actually.
Yes, we did.
Our own reputation for compassion, as well as the people that we betrayed. And that's something you can't put a price on.
Well, can I just finish on this, James?
Of course you can, John.
And I'm hoping your listeners are listening.
They will be.
Please don't blame us.
We don't blame you. No one blames you, mate. How could anyone with their head screwed on blame you for anything that is a consequence of political leadership or the absence of political leadership? Trust me.
Thank you.
Trust
me.
James. No, thank you, John. And I pass on the thanks of everybody listening and some messages coming in that show how many people you've touched. But and I just want you to know that you've got to be a little bit kinder to yourself on stuff like this. You've done your bit. You've done your duty. Your country owes you. You've got nothing to apologise. It owes you. Okay, it owes you a debt of gratitude. All right, and that's not for you to decide. That's for us to decide. All right.
Okay, sir.
You look after yourself, sir. Cheers, John.
Sir. You look after yourself. Take care. Bye-bye.
God bless. Take care. God, these people, man. These people who've got integrity running through their veins, having to comment upon their nominal leaders, having to reflect upon the betrayal of the people in Afghanistan. 3 tours. He's lucky to be here to talk to us at all, and 2 of his friends and 1 of his cousins aren't. And Dominic Raab stayed on holiday. Amelia Cox is here now with the headlines. 12:34 is the time, and I know it's not just you that feels very emotional sometimes when callers take you to places you didn't know existed, let alone places you didn't know that you were going to be taken to. I feel it as well, but obviously I have to pick myself up, dust myself down, and carry on with the conversation. And it's a conversation we should not be having. Again, in a country that should not be tolerating this sort of thing. Again, a conversation about the betrayal of our Afghan allies as a consequence of, according to a report from cross-party MPs led by a Conservative, as a consequence of appalling leadership from Dominic Raab and his opposite number in the civil service, both of whom remained on holiday as Kabul fell. So confining the conversation, of course, to soldiers that served there or people who come from there. And I think Mustafa in Peterborough comes from the second category, I think. What would you like to say, Mustafa?
Hi, James. Good to speak to you, mate.
Likewise.
I don't speak English as a first language, so you'd have to bear with me.
You're doing all right, I think. I don't think you've got any worries on that score. But what made you pick up the phone?
James, so I was born and raised in Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan when the Western troops, they came to Afghanistan. So I've still got family and friends there. A few of my friends, they were translators and interpreters for the European forces. Some of them, they did manage to get their documents sorted. They were evacuated to Germany and the United States. A couple of them, they made it to the UK as well, but there are quite a few of them still there. And as your last caller mentioned, the retreat was inevitable.
Of course.
So they could have had everything in order. They should have fought.
The speed with which the Taliban took Kabul was a big surprise, apparently, to the American and British.
It shouldn't have been a surprise,
well,
James.
I keep hearing that.
If it wasn't, I wasn't surprised at all. The Taliban were legitimized by Donald Trump when they started the peace negotiations. So this was going to happen. And the speed, I don't think it matters at all. It was going to happen. So if the West knew that it was inevitable, they should have had everything in order. Name of the people that helped them out during the war. I just think it's unfair. And
I hesitate to ask this question because I think I know part of the answer. But what sort of peril would these people be in if it became widely known, or if they're to the Taliban that they had helped the British Army?
Now, a word on the ground is that for a period of time they had a list of people that helped the Western Alliance during the war, that they were being targeted. Now, people that I know, they haven't been targeted yet, but there are rumors and stories going around that they were taken out from their homes. Some of them, they've never been seen again. Who knows if they were in prisons or if they've even been murdered. So I don't know, James.
And do you know people who are still trying to get out, who are sort of waiting on the paperwork almost?
My family, because my brother, he worked with the United Nations.
Right.
He was supposed to be evacuated with his wife and kids to the United States. Now, all the paperwork and everything sorted, apparently. All they're waiting for is for a phone call to get themselves to the airport. But that's been going on for more than 9 months now.
Shut up. Seriously?
And he's not the only one.
That's not the British government. That's the American system that's letting him down.
That's the American system, yeah. Wow. And some of the people that they evacuated during the first few days from Kabul airport, they're in refugee camps in Dubai and Qatar, and at least they're away from danger. I know they are, but they haven't been settled yet, so they don't know what's going on. Some people were deported back from Dubai to Afghanistan, so they were put on the planes from Afghanistan, took to Dubai, and then from there they were supposed to be sorry.
Take your time.
From there they were supposed to be taken to the United States or anywhere in Europe, but they were deported back. So all those people in the refugee camps, they don't know what's going on. They don't even know if the evacuation from there is going to go ahead. So,
what's the? This may not be an appropriate question because you've provided us with such detail of the lived experience. But when I read of the consequences for our interests around the world, how has the standing of the UK changed in Afghanistan since the evacuation?
The abandonment, James, is not unprecedented.
Right. No,
I don't know
that's
if
true.
you've read The Return of the King from William Dalrymple.
I haven't. No.
Okay.
No, I have. I'm sorry. I have read The Return of the King.
Yeah. Now, do you remember the bit during the retreat? Some Indian sepoys were abandoned.
Yes.
And when some of them did make it alive back to India, that gave rise to a new resistance.
Yes, I wasn't sure what you were drawing on there because I couldn't see the immediate parallel, but I can now, of course.
Yeah. So, and there are other history books and stuff. It's not unprecedented. It's happened in the past as well. But the point I'm trying to make,
yes,
if it was any other government, we could have at least expected some consequences, but not this government.
I mean, you'd have thought that, because I guess for their consequences to be consequences, there needs to be an admission of wrongdoing. For there to be an admission of wrongdoing, there has to be a semblance of integrity or shame, take your pick. And for there to be that, then there has to be a politician who cares about what's happened, and none of them do.
Yeah, exactly my point. So during this government, there's not going to be any questions asked. There's not going to be any consequences. And the people who were in charge probably be promoted or something similar.
The Select Committee publishes its report. We talk about it. John talks about it. Everybody listening feels a mixture of rage and shame. And they just sail on to the next scandal with our international reputation damaged enormously. But it's a government that has turned breaking the terms of a recently negotiated international legally binding treaty into an electoral weapon. I mean, it's one of those days, Mustafa. I don't know how much of the programme you've heard, but it's one of those days where you can't quite believe what you see when you look upstairs, isn't it?
No, and the only thing that's predictable, now that this story is broke, they're probably looking for another dead cat. They'll probably post another...
For someone who began the programme by apologising for not having English as a first language, you've given us a right old tour of the idioms and the figures of speech that I think gives the lie to the idea that you don't speak just as fluently and fluidly in English as you do in... would your native original language be Peshwari or Afghan? I don't know if I'm not very good at that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think it's because I listen to your shows more than I should. But...
I'll take the credit. I'll take the credit for that. Listen, I wish we'd spoken under happier circumstances. I really do, and I hope your brother gets out soon of Afghanistan. But thank you for helping us come to a much better understanding of what's really going on.
I appreciate that, James. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, mate, and stay safe.
Cheers,
Mustafa. It's just coming up to 12:44. I think I'll summon the Usherwood and we'll catch up with him after the break about what's gone on in lobby. Can we summon the Usherwood, please? I got a message yesterday saying, is it or pa, and I said it's because the first one sounds like the old adverts in the cinema, doesn't it? I always said I'd never sing on the programme. Turning into Boris Johnson when it comes to my trustworthiness. We'll catch up with you and maybe a couple of other calls from either people who served in Afghanistan or people from Afghanistan about this astonishing story. I can't do it every day, can I? Or we can't do it every day. How have we come to this? Again, an all-party committee of MPs delivers the most corrosive and castigating conclusions about our own conduct, our leadership in the evacuation of Afghanistan. And it's just more straw, which has now become the camel's bed. Any hope that these straws would break the camel? I don't know. Maybe Theo will give us a slightly different interpretation of the Sue Gray shenanigans that have seen Downing Street once again embark upon an astonishing farrago of untruths and obfuscations, or maybe he won't. You can find out after this. It's 48 minutes after 12 and the Usherwood has been summoned. Do you want to give us a quick heads up on some grim news from Ofgem?
Yes, just to start off with that, Jonathan Brearley, who's of course the boss at Ofgem, the energy regulator, has just said that the energy price cap in October is likely to go up into the region of £2,800 for an annual bill. At the moment it is £1,972.
Wow.
So it's going up another £900 from October. So that's the limit at which if you're going onto a new energy contract, that's the limit at which you can, the highest price that you can, or the highest price you can pay.
That's going to come as grim news to an awful lot of people. And now back to
Sue Gray.
Back to Sue Gray. Can you, because you've been at the lobby, it occurred to me, in fact, someone pointed out to me that they didn't know what that meant. Can you just talk us very briefly through exactly what that means and why you were there every day? So
the lobby is just, it's a chance to question the Prime Minister's spokesman. Journalists can go in. It's not on camera. It's not like the White House where you have it on camera and there's a Jen Psaki's there asking, she's now moved on, of course, answering questions for the White House. But it's just a chance where we can ask the Prime Minister's spokesman on the record about anything to do with the day's events. And then we can often get the responses to stories. Sometimes they reveal stories. Sometimes, like yesterday, they revealed that the Chief Secretary to the Treasury hadn't given us an accurate answer when he said about the fact that Sue Gray had instigated the meeting, when in actual fact it was Number 10 that had instigated the meeting between.
But that was on the front page of the Daily Mail yesterday. So would someone have dictated that to the political editor there, and he just wrote it all down? So that I'm feeling quite sorry for him because he got taken for a complete mug.
Well, separately, I don't know how the political editor of Daily Mail gets his stories, but somebody has told the bit about she was a little bit too keen on the limelight. And
that as well. How many people would recognise Sue Gray if she walked into the room now? Would you?
Well, that's my job.
Yeah, but would you?
Yes.
Well, here she is. You didn't recognise her when she walked... No, I'm only joking. I wouldn't recognise Sue Gray if she walked into the room now, and it's my job too. But, I mean, the idea that she's been seeking the limelight is absolutely ridiculous. But hey-ho.
So then we get to answer questions, and it's a chance for them to say, for them to put forward whatever the answer is, whatever they want to say for the day. But it's also a question to ask for us to...
Who is the spokesman at the moment?
He's a man called Max Blaine, but he's an independent civil servant.
Right.
So it's important, some of your listeners might be wondering where I would have guessed, and I wouldn't want to try and guess other journalist sources, but that the attack on Sue Gray may have been a political attack from somebody who is a political...
Is Gitto Harry still in Downing Street?
He's the Director of Communications.
So it might have come from that side of the office rather than the
Whereas Max Blaine
is a
civil servant.
Because he is acting in the role at the moment, or has he been permanently appointed to it? Because it's not normally a civil servant, is it? It was James Slack recently, until he went back to be Deputy Editor of The Sun.
No, but he was
Daily
a civil
Mail.
servant. He was a civil servant. Then he went to be Director of Communications.
Yes.
And he turned it into a civil service role.
Oh, I see. Okay. I knew it was worth asking these questions, but we better get on with what actually happened there. Now we know what it is.
Sue Gray report, we understand, is going to be tomorrow. It's certainly not going to be today. And the Prime Minister, just on the events. Now, the Prime Minister, there's this report, actually, it was in the Times newspaper, that the Prime Minister questioned whether Sue Gray needs to publish the report, given that in the Prime Minister's view, all of the information is out there in the public domain. Now, all the Number 10 spokesman would say is that the Prime Minister didn't ask for the report to be dropped. He didn't ask for the process of the publication of the report to be stopped. But that isn't the same as questioning the need for the report to be published. So
if I said to you, do you really need to come on the show today to do your amazing stuff again? And then someone said, did James O'Brien try to get Theo Usherwood not to come onto the show?
Did you know? You didn't try and stop the process?
I did nothing.
You didn't speak to Keith?
I had nothing
He needs to body block me coming in the door?
No, I just questioned whether or not there was any need really for you to be on the show today.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. So the photograph of course, of Lee Keynes leaving due November the 13th, 2020. Now, this was interesting because the Metropolitan Police has fined people in the room. So the Metropolitan Police has taken the view that this particular event was illegal. But the Prime Minister's spokesman couldn't say whether the Prime Minister thought the event was a party or a legitimate work event, given what the Metropolitan Police has said. Instead, just saying, we want to leave it for Sue Gray.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So that is another reason why it'd be really interesting.
So it's just a sort
an
of
almighty mess, isn't it? It really is.
It's a slightly odd situation, and that's putting it diplomatically, when the Metropolitan Police fine people for being at an event in Downing Street. So you assume the rules are broken. You then ask Downing Street whether they acknowledge the event attended by the Prime Minister was therefore an illegal gathering, a party, and they can't tell you that.
And it's been confirmed that we were dead right yesterday when we said that their claim that she had organised the meeting would be the fact that they asked for a meeting and she then put it in the diary, which allowed them to claim that she'd actually organised it.
I was reported,
that was bang on right. We got absolutely bang on.
Yeah, of course, James.
Amazing stuff.
You always tell me when I get it.
Pay attention, people. Pay attention. Theo knows what is going on. I think that's probably it, isn't it? But you'll be back with Sheila shortly, no doubt. That's got a nice ring to it. Sheila shortly. You'll be back with Sheila shortly.
And then tomorrow. Big day.
We get the report. Any idea what time?
I'd imagine it would probably be before PMQs, mid-morning, and then we can expect the Prime Minister obviously to do PMQs against Keir Starmer, and then give a statement to the House of Commons immediately afterwards, probably about 12:30, and then he'll be facing the 1922 Committee of Backbench Conservative MPs in the evening.
Thank you, Theo. There's another story I want to cover, but before that I must talk to Stuart in Boston because he's been on hold throughout that masterclass in political journalism from the inimitable Theo Usherwood. Stuart, what made you pick up the phone, mate?
Well, it was very interesting and quite moving to listen to my former colleague from Kettering. I served in the British Army and I was posted to Kabul in 2002. And such was my job out in Afghanistan that I worked directly with interpreters.
Right.
There was me, a colleague and an interpreter that went around together.
Gosh.
All day, every day. Now, you get very emotionally attached to these people. You get to know their life stories.
Yeah.
Without going into too much detail, because I don't want to disclose anything that may identify them.
Okay.
One of them was a Pashto, so he spoke the language of the Persian parts, the sort of the pseudo-Iranian language, and the other guy was a Tajik, which is from the northern part of Kabul and the northern part of Afghanistan, and kind of spoke the Tajik language and knew more about the sort of Russian way of life. Afghanistan is a real mixed bag. The culture is amazing.
Sure.
But these guys went through a lot to help us.
Yeah.
The fact that they weren't known to be helping us is just ridiculous.
Right.
Because I used to walk the streets of Kabul with these guys and talk to local people, and try and gather intelligence and try and show the friendly face of the NATO forces.
Wow.
So the idea that these guys are not known to the local population is just ridiculous.
Fair enough.
The Tajik interpreter told me about the day the Taliban sort of rode into town back in the 90s, the late 90s it would have been. A message came over the radio which said something like, this will be the last radio broadcast. TV and radio is going off. You're to throw out all your mirrors and anything that's like an icon.
Wow.
Men are to grow beards, women are to stop going to school and to wear the burqa. And then that was it. So this is the kind of society, I don't want to pass judgment on cultures, but this is a kind of oppressive society that people were living in. And all the time that we were there was always this undercurrent that they might come back. And I feel that although the government, the British government that is, kind of had their hands tied in regards to withdrawing forces from Afghanistan, because the US forces were, by and large, the major contributor. For instance, they kept the airport at Kabul secure and everything else. We could have managed it much better. Speaking for myself, who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, having served in Afghanistan from my time there, and now unable to work and feeling thoroughly ashamed of that. Didn't even take a bullet. I just fell over, you know. So I can't even like look some of my comrades in the eye who have lost family members and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But I kind of share their pain. All I would like to see is a government with some damn integrity. You know, most of the armed forces personnel, like the Marine Sergeant from Kettering kind of said, they're sort of small C talk conservatives, not Tories necessarily.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know,
yeah.
I don't necessarily count myself as one of them at all. But we want some integrity. What was all this thing about cats and dogs? If cats and dogs were being rescued, then that's fine. Just say so, because you're probably going to win as many friends as you're going to lose. You know, and it's just all the messing about, the welcome that we kind of give or don't give to refugees. It's just obscene, in my opinion.
Well, it's my opinion as well, but yours is a lot more informed by personal experience than mine is. Before you go, Stuart, do you know what happened to your two translators? Do you know?
No, I don't. One was an older guy and remembers the Russian occupation and spoke quite favourably of it, actually. and the other guy was a young guy whose sister was a teacher, and she had to obviously give up her profession when the Taliban came in. I've tried to find them on social media.
But no joy.
But no joy.
Well,
I just sort of pray that they're safe and well. And just finally, because I bet you want to go to the news.
You're not wrong.
I don't say this as a royalist.
No.
Necessarily, but I say thank God for the Queen, because I would loathe the idea that we're sending soldiers into harm's way, or anyone into harm's way in combat off the back of these lying politicians that currently reside in government. They're a disgrace.
Beautifully put, Stuart, and I thank you for your words and, of course, for your service. And an echo, actually, of what John said there. In fact, it may be helpful for John to think that it wouldn't be under Boris Johnson's banner that the next generation of soldiers would be marching to war. It would still be, of course, for Queen and country. And that's taken, as Stuart suggested, right up to 1 o'clock. Up next on LBC, it's Sheila Fogarty. 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 On LBC.